A large section of the Hunter River bank has been cut away and dredged to make way for a shipping berth that will increase the port's coal output by more than 20% to 53 million tonnes a year.
Progress is going along well, the work having commenced at the end of August '93, and currently we're on schedule for the first ship to be berthed here towards the end of September this year.
The work is being carried out by Kandak Thies joint venture and will cost around $100 million. A second berth is being dredged, a new wharf is to go in, and extensions will be made to the shiploading and reclaiming conveyors. The President of the New South Wales Industrial Commission, Mr Justice Fisher, inspected the site this morning before a sitting of the Commission in Newcastle ratified a new industrial agreement for the work. The award is structured around productivity, communication and safety improvements, uniting employers and contractors.
It provides a basis for monitoring progress and a consultative mechanism for resolving issues as they arise during the progress of the works.
The Central Coast was the rendezvous point for Northern District miners taking their concerns over low coal prices to Canberra. The Miners' Union believes jobs are at risk if coal companies cave into customers over the price of steaming coal used in Japanese power stations. Fears were fuelled when large companies accepted rock-bottom prices for coking coal used by the steel industry. The union called an indefinite strike over the weekend. Miners walked off the job and onto buses heading for a rally outside Parliament House tomorrow.
Our union is restructured, our industry's restructured. The last 4 or 5 years, coal companies go away and give away the gains they've made, then they keep coming back and they sack our workers and keep telling us they want more and more and more. There's got to be an end to it. In the Northern District where I'm from, I think we'd lose three underground coal mines up as far as Gunnedah, and I think there'd be an open cut close. I think probably 1,000 or more men.
We believe that if something can be done about it, maybe in the future it'll ensure jobs for our children, our brothers, our families. For every job that's lost in the industry, there's 1 or 2 in the outside industry goes as well. So it's not only the mining industry that's suffering, it's the general community.
Busloads of miners are already on their way from Queensland and Gunnedah. They'll be joined by others from the South Coast tomorrow. A delegation will seek talks with Resources Minister David Biddle.
One of the main things, as far as I'm concerned, particularly in my own district, is the fact that the steaming coal prices shouldn't be affected. Biddle said that originally 6 weeks ago. It's extremely important because now with the firming up dollar, if there's any reduction in the steaming coal prices, it would be, as I said yesterday, a disaster. The blokes that you've got here are probably affected. You might not see them in a job somewhere down the track.
"29-year-old Paul Anthony Richardson told the court he'd taken drugs and had been drinking heavily for 19 hours before he murdered Sandra Lee Millwood in May last year. Justice Finlay said that was no excuse. The judge found that Richardson had forced his way into Mrs Millwood's head and greeter home. He went into the bedroom and had sex with her against her will. Mrs Millwood's daughter had been awoken by her mother's screams. The child saw Richardson tie her up at knife point and take her away in a car. Sandra died of multiple skull fractures. A partially burnt body was found dumped in bushland behind Curry Golf Club. Last week, Paul Richardson pleaded guilty to the murder. In an interview with a detective, he said, "You know, it was just one of those things. She would have told me wife and got all the money. She was going to go to the cops. I had to talk her out of it, so I took her in the car." Richardson has killed before. In the mid-80s, he served a 3-year jail term for the manslaughter of his uncle, an uncle who'd sexually abused him from the age of 5. Justice Finlay acknowledged that Richardson had come from a harsh background, but sentenced him to a minimum of 20 years in jail, at which time he'll be eligible for parole. However, if he shows no sign of rehabilitation, he may serve the rest of his life in prison. To Sandra Millwood's family, the sentence wasn't long enough.
I'd like to see the pain and torment that he put through Sandra haunt him, and I hope he suffers. I hope he dies in. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
The Coalfield side was made up of players from 4 Hunter clubs, Singleton, Western, Cessnock and Maitland. Although they trained together only once before last night's game, the locals seemed to have plenty of natural cohesion. They spent plenty of their time in the opposition's half, and 10 minutes into the game they found the break they'd been looking for. Ian Tressiter chased up a lob, left the goalie motionless to clear a path for an easy goal. The goal surprised the Singapore nationals and spurred them into attack mode. Repeatedly, they fired the ball in, every one of the Coalfields players joining in the defence of the net. But in the deteriorating weather, the Singapore players found their feet and finished a comfortable 2 goals clear. Western Oval has been pretty busy over the past few days. It's also the venue for the local competition's pre-season cup. Second Division club Budgie in the green and yellow surprised everyone with their performance against First Division side Maitland. With a minute to go, they led 3-1. Maitland's Duncan Richards, though, made the score a bit more respectable after cleaning up a rebound from goalie Kane Norris. Budgie, Lake Macquarie, West Wallsend and Weston were all winners this week. Singleton and Lambton played a 1-1 draw. The next round of the Cup will be played Friday week.
Pies, glorious pies. More than 300 of the meaty delicacies for judging at Newcastle Show's pie contest. Round ones, square ones, every sort. Sent from cake shops and bakeries all over the Hunter and the North Coast. The judges George and Mark are 2 men who take their job seriously.
Well, first you have to go on appearance. The flaky pastry, a nice firm bottom. Of course, the most important part is the filling too. If you achieve all those 3 objectives, you have the perfect pie.
On looks alone, they were reduced to a dozen. But the pie also has to look good on the inside. Not too much pastry, just enough meat, and not too runny. And then there were 3. All looked good, but how did they taste? After nearly 15 minutes of smelling, tasting and swallowing, it was still a deadlock, the judges calling on the microwave to reheat the pies for another testing. Finally, a decision. One had perfect pastry but tasted ordinary, another tasted great but lacked the looks, and one was just right. The best pie maker in the business, Terrigal Cake Shop on the Central Coast, thus ending another hard day for these dedicated judges.
It's a pretty hard job. Very hard job, yeah. Eating pies. Terrible job.
So what do they eat after tasting the best pies in the land? A salad. Richard O'Leary, NBN News.
"16 patients who needed to be admitted to the Mater Hospital had to sleep on trolleys in the Accident and Emergency Department on Sunday night because there were no beds for them on the wards.
Waiting on emergency room trolleys, waiting for bed. I don't think this is appropriate.
Dr Paul Hui was one of 4 Australian doctors who recently operated on patients in Bosnia.
This is sometimes worse than Bosnia. When I come back Monday, I find that this place is like a war zone with body lying everywhere. There's nowhere to go.
Dr Hui says patients couldn't be referred to the John Hunter Hospital on Sunday night because it too was full. Hunter Health Boss Dr Smythe says the problem at the Mater has been exacerbated because some beds have been closed.
I don't really understand why they have taken some of the action that they have. We recognise that they have had financial problems, they've had problems in their management reporting systems, but I think it's time that the Mater Hospital, in conjunction with the Area Health Service, really had a good thorough look at what's going on over there.
Dr Smythe concedes that hospital bed shortages have been caused by other factors too. He says some beds are unnecessarily being taken up by people from outside the Hunter, and other beds are being used by the elderly because of a shortage of nursing home beds. Dr Smythe says the Health Service is trying to rectify both of these problems. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
Stocks in the port were already low because of the recent upsurge in demand. Rail receivables had only just been keeping up with the loading schedule, and now those deliveries have ceased altogether. 7 more vessels wanting cargoes arrived off the port in the last 24 hours, bringing the number riding at anchor to 15, and another 2 more ships are expected to turn up in the next few days. While some stockpiles are evident, no complete cargo for any one vessel is available, so loading has stopped completely. The miners will not be returning to work until late Friday night. This is despite warnings from colliery proprietors that their strike action will cost Australia $170 million for the week's lost production. Apart from affecting short-term profitability, the industrial action's also damaging the country's international reputation as a coal supplier. The Miners' Union was called before the Coal Industry Tribunal after defying an order not to strike in protest against the refusal by companies to pay workers attending today's rally. The miners say their action is in the best interests of the coal industry and the country, designed as it is to try and stop reductions in prices to Japanese buyers. Cavilled-out miners and union officials will man a tent on the Parliament House lawn and have vowed to remain until the government agrees to intervene in the price negotiation process. The union has scheduled further talks on the matter with the Prime Minister on Thursday.
There's been a revolution under the roofs of many homes in Australia since the 1950s. Roles have been redefined or confused along the way. The shape of families has changed. The pill, the TV set and employment or lack of it have impacted heavily. One definition of the family these days may be a group of people sharing the same address. Such ideas were discussed at the Hunter launch of the International Year of the Family today.
If you try to define the family, you begin to make judgments about who's in and who's out. And that's not appropriate. I think it ignores the reality of the diversity of families in our multicultural society.
Various perspectives on family life were shared by Indigenous people and speakers such as psychologist Trevor Waring and broadcaster Geraldine Doog. International Year of the Family will attempt to focus on equality between men and women, the recognition of grandparents as carers and flexible workplace practices for parents. An underlying theme to the launch was that despite the complexities of modern life, simply spending time with one another is the glue that holds families together. Andrew Lobb, NBN News.
Stewards rated the track as dead, but it was hard to tell the course wasn't in perfect condition. The crowd wasn't a record breaker, but they came to the course with a very important ingredient, cash. There was plenty of it. Favourite Polyak didn't waver at all in the betting, while Dance Affair blew out to 66-1. Some of those in the know were making sure Moment's Pleasure stayed value for money at 6-1. But as they flew down the straight, it was still anyone's race. Moment's Pleasure, ridden by apprentice Corey Brown, got there by half a head, but looking at trainer Bill Prain, it could have been a kilometre.
For me, it's the biggest thrill I've had in training for 7 years.
While Prain collected the winner's cheque of $82,000 on behalf of the owners, the TAB paid out a little bit less, $10 for the win and $2.10 for the place. The Quinella $9.40 and the trifecta $177.50. Tomorrow, Gary Harley recommends Flitter in the main race, the Carlton Newmarket.
In May last year, 46-year-old Peter Donald Dwyer was arrested and charged with 2 counts of attempted murder of his wife Cheryl and 37-year-old Charles Borton. However, he later pleaded guilty to the lesser charges of administering poison with intent to endanger life. Today, in Moree Court, he was sentenced to a minimum of 2 years and 9 months in jail. The court had heard that a relationship developed between Dwyer and Penny Borton, his partner's wife, which Penny later called off. Explaining his actions, Dwyer said he poisoned his victims' coffee to make them feel sick, in retaliation for his wife and Borton interfering in his relationship with Penny Borton. They have both since recovered.
Well, apparently both the accused person's wife and his previous partner, Mr. Borton, are almost back to full physical capabilities.
Both married couples are now reconciled. Dwyer was taken from the Moree police station this afternoon to begin serving his sentence at the Tamworth Correction Centre. The miners went on strike last weekend in the build-up to a rally of almost 2,000 of their number in Canberra on Tuesday. They claim that cuts in the prices for coal being paid by our Japanese customers will cause substantial job losses and up to $400 million in export earnings. The strike quickly brought coal loading in the port of Newcastle to a halt, with 17 vessels now waiting off the harbour and 3 others tied up inside waiting for cargoes. Port Waratah Coal Services says coal should begin arriving tomorrow, with loading to resume Sunday at the earliest, and it will be the end of next week before operations are back to normal. Even so, the week-long delay will cause a bank-up of ships, which some sections of the industry claim will cause harm to our reputation overseas as a reliable coal supplier. The upcoming meeting with Resources Minister Beddall will be preceded next week by a conference with the Minister for Industrial Relations, Laurie Brereton.
The rescue unit was at Hamilton headquarters this afternoon before going on to a public viewing at the Newcastle show. The vehicle is designed by ambulance officers for ambulance officers. Local rescue worker Wayne Garner worked with a Sydney colleague to produce a practical vehicle within a budget.
We're working in the trucks all the time. We know what sort of equipment goes in them, and it's a lot easier for us to explain something to an engineer rather than him coming out and trying to work it himself.
The result is a $120,000 rescue truck manufactured by JCAB in Tamworth. It's mounted on the back of a Hino truck with many additional features. Officers have easier access to emergency equipment, and the generator is operated from the cabin. An important feature is a cabin for a patient, complete with first aid facilities and a heart start machine.
When we get to a scene, if the patients outnumber the ambulances that we have on scene, we can then treat the patient and, if necessary, transport.
It's a stark contrast to rescue vehicles the station has used for the past 15 years, which are cramped and often impractical. The new vehicles carry 6 tonnes of equipment, double what the old vehicles could handle, and are twice as fuel efficient. The vehicles will be phased in throughout the state over the next 5 years, with Hamilton to get its new unit by June, with Singleton and Rutherford to follow. Richard O'Leary, NBN News.
Newcastle's second highest ranking police officer, Superintendent Ian Cleary, is now working in Gosford. He was transferred there following the launch of an internal police investigation into an incident which occurred on the South Stane floating restaurant in November last year. The superintendent arrested Udo Fries after Mr Cleary's daughter telephoned him, alleging she was being harassed by patrons on the vessel. The charges against Mr Fries were subsequently dropped. Member for Charlestown, Richard Face, says Superintendent Cleary's wife contacted him, concerned that what has eventuated from the South Stane affair is part of a conspiracy to discredit her husband. Last night, Mr Face detailed Mrs Cleary's complaints in Parliament, one of these relating to the procedure used in withdrawing the charges against Mr Fries. Under the Licensing Act, the only way the matter could be dispensed with is before a magistrate, that is, before a court. Yet the matter has been dispensed with by negotiation within the police service with a variety of civilians. Mrs Cleary, who was Superintendent Cleary's secretary at Newcastle Police Station, also raised her husband's role in attempting to close down local brothels under the Disorderly Houses Act. Mrs Cleary believes the superintendent's policing of brothels and the South Stane incident are inextricably linked. Mrs Cleary says that as the events of the 13th of November last year started to unfold, she became convinced that there was a major conspiracy to attack her husband's credibility and reduce him to ridicule to ensure that brothel keepers continued to flourish in Newcastle. Mr Face has referred that matter to the ICAC and the Ombudsman.
It would be proper to say that this incident is going to tear the police service in Newcastle apart for a period of time.
Police Commissioner Tony Lauer refused to comment today, saying the matter is subject to an internal police investigation. Catherine Lamond, NBN News.
Two American servicemen attended the performance today, together with parents and a local man who was a student at the same school 50 years ago when the plane came down just 500 metres away.
Well, the school was in class. It was in the afternoon, and we suddenly heard this very loud noise which we knew to be an aeroplane, but we'd never heard an aeroplane with so loud a noise before, and we realised that it was very close. No idea of what was wrong or what was likely to happen, but the next moment, within seconds, we heard this almighty crash.
A bright-eyed 13-year-old Harold was confronted with a miracle. Schoolmates ran to the crash site. Most of the crew on the plane had parachuted to safety, but 2 died when their parachutes failed to open. Another 5, including the pilot, stayed in the plane and managed to land safely without an engine and the plane's right wing. A mounted DC-3 propeller will stand in the school grounds from today as a monument to the crash and a memory that will be etched in the quiet town's memory forever.
Please.
Mazira slashed a second off the track record, but there's less than half a second separating the top 6 cars. Amaru winner Mark Scaife joins him on the front line of the grid, only 2/100ths of a second in front of the Falcon of John Bowe. Peter Brock continues to perform well in the 05 Commodore, just behind traditional rival Dick Johnson. Glenn Seaton was a disappointment of the day. He'll start in 8th position.
Oh, it's made it difficult, but I've come from back there before, so I'm not giving up.
Wayne Gardner continues to have problems on 4 wheels, finishing on the wrong end of the top 10. Newcastle's Wayne Russell is an unlikely starter after blowing up his engine in Friday's practice. Richard O'Leary, NBN News.
"100 golfers from across the state were vying for the prestigious title. 6 years ago, Gail Cannon of Toronto won the first Classic. She was playing in the same group as defending champ Cherie Burns of Nelson Bay. Girls as young as 15 played the 18-hole course like veterans, while the oldest qualifier for the day, 80-year-old Marie Chapman of Batemans Bay, played the course like a youngster. Tiny white balls were again at the wrong end of a stick at Newcastle's International Hockey Centre. Newcastle continued its undefeated run in the State League, beating Sydney's Eastern Districts 2-1. First half goals by Newcastle's Megan Lippy and Nicole Avard sealed it for the Novocastrians. Eastern Districts rallied in the second half when Jenny Mills slotted the ball into the net following a goalmouth scramble. However, the class of goalkeeper and Barcelona Olympian Lisa Norton ensured the home side victory. And a first for 60 bowling clubs in the Newcastle district, an open day to win people back to the sport. More than 50 newcomers turned out at the Cardiff Club. Free coaching was given and clubs across the district have reported an increase in membership. Jason Neuenhoff, NBN News. The 40 crews who set sail for the title yesterday were reduced to only 8 today in the waters of Belmont Bay. 4 of the skiffs still in the hunt were from Belmont, with the others from Sydney. Representing the home club was 2 Beechwood home 16-footers skippered by Gary Brunigus and John Millwood, together with Bradville Garages skippered by John Anderson and Luxury Afloat with Graham McKellar at the helm. Trevor Barnabas in Barracuda 2UE, Craig Ferris in Otis 2 and Craig Nichols in Typhoon Fabrics were holding the hopes of the Sydney contingent. A crowd of 1,000 watched the final day's action from the Belmont 16-foot skiff clubhouse. They weren't let down with the nor'easter blowing at 25 knots and plenty of tactical action. Competitors praised the work of the host club and the challenging 4-kilometre figure-8 course. Belmont's performance both in and out of the water in the final event of the 16-footers season cemented its position as one of the sport's strongholds.
Early today, a dedicated group of local divers put on their scuba gear for a special assignment under the harbour wharves. The usual byproduct of a consumer society was scrounged from the harbour floor, along with some not so unusual rubbish. Other dedicated volunteers were hard at work along the foreshore and streets of Coffs Harbour. The city's improvement committee is counting down to the Sydney Olympics. It believes today was the first step towards making Coffs the cleanest city in Australia by the year 2000. Meanwhile in Taree, all ages took part in the clean-up. An enormous amount of rubbish was unearthed. One scout group worked along the roadside between Purfleet and Martins Bridge, discarded P-plates and dangerous glass among the waste. But for one lucky volunteer, it wasn't just the environment that benefited.
She asked the duck, will you help me plant? He's going to wait. Not the duck.
Not I quacked the duck. Not I barked the dog. Not I meowed the cat. Not I grunted the pig. They're not very helpful, are they? No. And she did.
By the weekend, Merriweather Street will be lined with palm trees, the first of which arrived this morning from Scone. In all, 9 trees from throughout country New South Wales will be brought to the honeysuckle site, carefully put in planter boxes by local tree surgeon Peter Hill.
We're using a special soil mix and to go around to encourage the roots. We'll also be using a root hormone, that's to stimulate the palm to make new roots, which makes them so ideal for transplanting.
The Canary Island palms each cost around $4,000. They're in great demand as they're under threat on parts of the coast.
2 weevils that have come from the sugarcane are now attacking the palms and are killing them in great numbers right up to the Queensland coast. So we're very wary. If we're going to put them in the boxes, we want them to last. So rather than buy infected plants, we've gone into the country where the weevils aren't as common.
All $400,000 will be spent landscaping the Civic Rail site. The work should be completed toward the end of the year, when tenants for the 6 heritage buildings are expected to move in. $5 million is being spent restoring the buildings, which could be used for restaurants, cultural, entertainment, retail or produce markets. Jodie McKay, NBN News. FAI Mining has told residents it will demolish these 100-year-old buildings at Redhead in 2 weeks. They can, however, be saved if council agrees to rezone surrounding land to residential. The company has indicated it will then spend up to $1 million restoring the buildings, but council has to find a use for the structures.
The main suggestions appear to be some form of community arts use. We have looked at some commercial use, such as doctor's surgeries and those sort of opportunities that may be there for the Redhead community.
Council will hold urgent talks with FAI Mining to try to come up with a solution acceptable to both parties. Meanwhile, Council has deferred for 2 weeks a decision on the ward structure for the city. Under the new Local Government Act, councils have to have a maximum of 15 councillors, including the mayor. Lake Macquarie has 4 wards of 4 councillors and the mayor. Councillor John Kilpatrick believes there are 2 viable options.
I think it'll be either 7 wards of 2 councillors or 4 wards of 3. I really think it would be a retrograde step to go back to any less than 4. We have 3rd ward now, which covers very much the western side of the lake. Now, to make that ward even bigger, to go from YE basically to West Wall's End, really I think is a step backwards.
Jodie McKay, NBN News.